I mix what I like, what I like.
I mix what I like is exactly where you want and need to be. I mix what I like organic, vegan, soul food from your immediate diet. That's healthy.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
What's up, world? Welcome to another edition of I Mix What I Like. Again, I'm Jared Ball. Very happy to be your host. Welcome. Come on in. Like, share, subscribe. Support our Patreon. Links in the show description. And put this in your socials. Invite others to join you. Mike Africa Jr. will be joining us about 9 o'clock to talk about his new book, On a Move, and to get us started on this wonderful Monday morning, July 22nd. What's up, everybody? Peace, 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 and welcome, welcome. Good to see you all. As good as could be expected. Exactly. That's how we doing. That's how we doing. Big bro in the building. So a number of things before Mike gets here that I thought we could get to. One of my homeboys invited me to say a word or two about at least one of the topics, and did a little bit of digging around and looked at a couple things. So we'll get into that. Obviously, the big news that Biden dropped out of the race. Kamala Harris getting his support. And then as it relates to the topic of multiraciality, mixed race politics, Amber Rose gave her talk at the RNC. So I was invited to say a word or two, given my own background in these mixed race streets, and thought we would talk again a little bit about that and link it to some of the work I've been trying to focus on here for this book chapter. That, I mean, it's going to get done, and it's going to be better than it is now. But Elon, Bom dia, peace, can't stay long, saw the thumbnail, want to tell Jab that can't comment on Amber's mixedness without the context of her Cape Verdean. I'm saying this as a Cape Verdean. I would love to add that dynamic to it. And it's not that, at least as I'm understanding it, and I'm happy, in fact, would love to talk with you about it if you like, it's not entirely dissimilar to, I think, Kamala Harris's situation as coming from the diaspora into this space. Now, I know that's not exactly what you mean, probably, but and I know the Cape has its own dynamics, but so yeah, I'm happy to. That was not going to is not. I had not planned on having that figure too prominently, but I'm happy that you brought it up, and I'm happy to, as always with everything we do around, or everything I do around here, I'm happy to extend the conversation beyond what is presented today. It's always insufficient. Yeah, so anyway, so let's get into a couple of things, and then there's a few other things we might be able to get to, including, I sent it to the EYL crew, but I might want to get it started a little bit today, at least, why Lord Jamar says he does not play the pause game. There's been some discussion in some spaces around our joking relationship to the pause game. And I admit it as a contradiction of sorts, but I thought what Lord Jamar said, as what he's been saying about the history of hip hop, has a basis. It's like a lot of things, has a foundation and accuracy, but then it goes into some And I did. I also watched that, Confessions of a Quadroon. Maybe we can talk a little bit about that. Someone else recommended it to me. I had not seen it before, but did watch that this morning and thought that was also very interesting. So, all right, so let's get into a couple things here. I'll start here. I just want to play this quick clip. Now, in my notes here, I said that when Amber Rose spoke at the RNC, that this was the RNC's equivalent to, what did I write here? The Republican convention equivalent to Obama's 2004, I think, right, Democratic National Convention speech, where he said, there is no Black America, white America, Latin America, there's only America.
I realize Donald Trump and his supporters don't care if you're Black, white, gay, or straight. It's all love.
So that was it. That was, I think that's all I needed for her to play from that. Because really what I'm ultimately saying, and I'll just reorder this a little bit. My thoughts on this issue, and it's a little more complicated than we have maybe some time today, or I'm organized enough thought-wise to get into today. But there's that race as a social construct does have a function. Race is itself politicized, and there is often a contradiction or a struggle between how one identifies racially and even how one looks. So, and with the complication in this country, in particular, of the one-drop rule being specific really to this country, as opposed to, again, outside of this country where it's largely the reverse, that in this country, the one-drop rule, and then I watched a discussion with Yaba Blay talking about her book on the one-drop rule about a year ago, where she made the point that, I did like her point, that race is created to defend racism, but that also, that what I didn't remember, at least, is that the one drop rule, at least in its origin, and then she talks about the history of it has itself evolved as a rule. It started with that if you had one Black relative going back 5 generations, you counted as being Black as part of the one. That was the initial goal of protecting the racial, quote unquote, purity of whiteness. Obviously, that has evolved where up until my lifetime, being born in 1971, 4 years, I believe, after interracial marriage was officially made legal in this country. I think Loving was 67, right? 66, 65, somewhere around there. One drop had really evolved, in my experience, to if you have one Black parent, certainly, it might extend beyond that, but certainly if you had one Black parent, you were Black. And again, oversimplifying, in my humble anecdotal experience, it was largely it was an invitation. Thank you, Rad. The chat is never wrong. Loving is 67. In my anecdotal experience, non-scientific, et cetera, and so forth, the overall broad-based, oversimplified experience was the Black community wanting me to identify as Black and negatively judging me if it was ever assumed that that was not happening. Now, once that was done, there was still plenty to work. There was plenty of wiggle room for the jokes of what kind of Black. But there was that initial, and I do have this early memory. I wish I remembered anybody's name, but in the suburban Section 8 neighborhood I grew up in initially here in these tree-lined streets after leaving DC, I think about 4 or 5 years old. I remember my first memory of this being an issue and realizing that this was an issue. As a kid, I think generally speaking, we just go out and play with whoever's outside, and most of the kids outside, all of the kids outside at this time were Black. So I'm outside But apparently a controversy had emerged over where I was on this spectrum. And I do remember this dark-skinned young sister, and I wish I've always wanted to credit her for this. And she just put her arm around me and was like, no, he's with us. It's like it was, and she was like it was a rap. It was like, in the way I remembered, at least, it was like that's it. I've spoken. Like she set the tone. She was like, no, we're not doing that. It was that kind of energy. So this is not to say it's all been, whatever, but I'm just saying that was okay. So I thought that was interesting so I'm saying that this is a social construct and that race plays a certain function, and that increasingly, as I've been trying to argue and not really studying enough, I will admit this, but we've pointed to some others' research on this in terms of advertising and the prevalence of interracial relationships and mixed race children in commercials, et cetera, and so forth, vis-a-vis their percentages in the community, in the population, that is, that the construct of race, and in this case, the construct of multiraciality or mixed raciality, is politicized initially to create the quote unquote purity of the white race, and now to disunify, I think, the overcorrected error that they made in the initial construct of creating a nationalism among Black people. Now that the community in this country is becoming more diverse, as the numbers of white people relative to the rest of the population are dwindling, there has become an increased interest in expanding the census categorization, expanding the representation of interracial relationships far beyond, I think, their prevalence in real life, particularly as it pertains to Black-white interracial relationships, and then to invite as much confusion around the politics of race into the conversation as possible. So that's one thing. There's also one point that I think is important to note, that it's important that we all, particularly those of us of mixed background, to recognize the space between, or the contradiction maybe between, how we identify versus our personal feelings, or how we are identified versus our personal feelings. So this is not to say that our own self-concept shouldn't be itself a construct of positivity and love, et cetera, and support, but we should also be able to recognize how our identity plays, or is being played. It's not that entirely different from when we've had conversations around, be a little careful about who invites you to speak in certain spaces, because while you may want to accept the invitation, they may have their own political reasons for the invitation. It's the same thing here. And I've even talked a little bit about, I was invited to write about this a couple years ago, and it was not, and even though it was invited, it was not accepted. The publisher didn't do anything with it. But the point was, I was invited to write about what I was calling my invitation to whiteness. And I was trying to write about this particular point, and the ultimate point of the piece was that there have been moments in my life where the white world makes an invitation, not that all different from an earlier childhood experience of being told you're Black, but not like you're. In fact, that's not what he said. The little boy said, "You're a nigger, just not like the other niggers." And he meant it as a compliment. Like, that's what is so funny. Is it funny when I think back on it? He thought he was making a compliment. But what it was, and then of course it evolves and becomes more sophisticated as we become adults sometimes, that becomes an invitation to whiteness to say, disassociate yourself, accept the positive disassociation we're offering you from your Blackness. And I've always consciously rejected that, to my own personal detriment, to my own social detriment, to my career detriment. But it's always been even at times, familial detriment, because I've just not ever, from whatever was in that initial genetic transmission or whatever it is, I've just never personally, I've always felt very keenly aware of it and wanted to reject it. So even watching certain arguments take place where even the Black representative in the space was not wanting to welcome me, was not wanting for me to be included. That for me was never enough to accept the invitation to whiteness. So if it's just like, if the Black community is not going to accept me, then I'll just be out here in the wilderness, because I'm damn sure, because I had an argument, again, a lot of this is anecdotal. I worked with another mixed dude at a pizza spot. Vernon is not. Vernon was there. I think he might have even been in the room when this debate happened. But Vern was making pizzas, and me and this other mixed dude had this exchange, and he was talking about how he just was happy to be with his white girl, and white this and white. And I just was like, I've never felt comfortable with that. I don't know how you, and then his argument was, well, the Black community never welcomed me either. And even then I was like, what does that have to do with it? I was like, I don't give a damn. The entire African world could reject me. I'm still not going. I was like, because to enter into that white space is to acknowledge, and this was the point I was trying to make, you have to acknowledge and then accept the dehumanization. That's at least how I felt. Now, this isn't about having even a white partner. This isn't even about having white friends or certainly comrades. It's to say, when you are fully subsumed within the whiteness, it's the internal collapse that causes is the trauma is not worth it. I was like, I'd rather just be alone. But more importantly than how either of us felt, my point was then, and still is, none of that is relevant to an attempt at an objective analysis of race in the world. How I'm treated, how he's treated, how she's treated, how this one's treated is good for conversation, maybe even helpful therapeutically, but I think ultimately has nothing to do, or should have very little to do, with how we ultimately analyze. So that was why I was trying to say how we feel needs to be assessed separately from how we are identified. And then ultimately, that the other 2 points that I just wanted to quickly reference here as it relates to Amber Rose and the rest of this is that when Amber is there talking now about being mixed and welcomed into this Republican space, what she's acknowledging, like is often the case with people who would be in Democratic Party spaces, is that they're scared of the real left. They're scared of actual left politics and the analysis that would bring to bear, and the call for action that would encourage. And then something that I would like to come back to is this issue in Professor Halliday's book around symbolic power. And in fact, I wasn't really sure how to, I'm still working this out, but this is, so somewhere in all of this is that for Amber Rose and Kamala Harris, as people with one Black parent, one African diaspora parent, and one non-Black parent, one non-African diaspora parent, they are being presented, or being encouraged to be presented, as, certainly in Kamala Harris's situation, as Black women, in the same way that Barack Obama was presented as a Black man. However we identify with the one-drop rule or that sentiment, that is one point. The point is that's how they're being presented. So when I see that, and even in the case with Amber Rose, even where there's this discussion, because I know, Joe Budden went back. I can't deal with Budden right now after that his revelations around his relationship with his pets. But never mind what should have been, for me and others, a more line drawn around the allegations of abuse against Esther Baxter and maybe others. But my point is, Joe Budden recently went back and pulled out the audio from when Amber was on one of these reality TV shows and having an argument, and where this Afro Latina is saying to her, "I see you as a black woman," and Amber is saying, "Don't do that. I'm not a black woman. I am I identify as mixed race." And then it's come out later that she tried to deny that and say that she's never run away from accepting herself as a black woman, and then had to retract that statement when the revelations around what she had said previously, rejecting a black identity, were brought back. But my point is that the Republican Party is attempting to present her as a black woman, as a diversity inclusion, whether she's identifying as mixed or not. And this, to my previous point, should be recognized as opposed to how she feels about herself. And she should recognize, as my point, what's being done, what is attempted to be done. The other point about that is that something that Dr. James Turner talked about years ago in a course that he was co-teaching with a white professor at the time, was that he made the point that I forgot exactly how he said it, but he was saying something similar to what's happening here, that yes, these people may be mixed and have a white or a non-black parent, but it is the black parent, it is the African heritage that becomes the determining factor here. So anyone can discuss it as mixed race. I could be described as mixed, and whatever, our complexions could be assessed, etc. But it is the relationship to that blackness that is the determinant here, whether we are inside or outside the one drop rule, whether we're assessed as black or not black. It is the blackness that is being questioned. It is the foundation here. So I'm saying all that to say, to quickly make this point here, that I'm struggling with in terms of what Halliday is doing, but I think she's at least raising provocative points about the relationship, in this case, between black women, advertising, and pop culture. So she's talking about, for instance, with the rise of the internet and social media too, these and other corporations sought out black women as cultural influencers to broaden market appeal. That's something similar to what the Democrats and Republicans, as exponents of corporate interests, are doing, is using black women as cultural influencers to broaden market appeal. From the hair care industry to children's imaginative play with Mattel's dolls and Disney's princesses, black women have fomented black women's buying power and the need for corporations and politicians to incorporate black women's perspectives in their products and ads. Women's active participation in the shaping of black symbolic power at the same time as the 21st century's placeholder for racial equality is illustrative. All illustrate the ways black women's cultural production can be commandeered for purposes of others. And that's ultimately where I'll claim that I understand what Halliday is saying, and that on this point we at least agree that, in my words, there is recognition by the corporate ruling elite, or the ruling elite as they're organized through corporations, to use black women, to use to promote their own interests. And we're seeing variations of the same thing happening here. I did get the clip, but I think I said, yeah. This is actually one of the stories that I looked at in terms of resurfaced clips contradict Amber Rose's claims about identifying as black. The reality star continues to spark controversy following her Trump endorsing speech at RNC 2024. And her back and forth with Joy Reid. So this was the other issue that I just raised very quickly, that again, when people like Amber Rose do this, going more to the right, people who are safely liberal and hostile to radicalism are projected as somehow some advance. So the two of them had a back and forth, and Reid said the choice of Rose by the right questioned the choice of Rose by the right, noting she's racially ambiguous. I don't want to say she's black because she said she's not. So we're back to who was the arbiter here. But fair enough, to Reed's point, Amber Rose is more racially ambiguous, and if she's claiming she doesn't want to be identified as black, then Reed added to say that this person who is the endorser of Donald Trump, who you should trust when she won't even claim the culture that brought her to the table. I'm dubious that this will work. I don't know anyone who takes their political cues from Amber Rose, but just in case you do, you might want to duplicate doing your own research because she might not have done it thoroughly. Rose, who identifies as biracial, caught wind of Reed's comments and responded on Twitter saying, "Hi, I never said I wasn't black. I said I identify as biracial. I'm not going to invalidate my white father to make you feel more comfortable." So in our previous interview, and I should put it in the show description, I've always liked what Dream Hampton had to say about this, having a black mother and having a black mother and a white father, right? No, a black father and a white mother, because she was right, because she was saying identifying as black is no more a negation of my white mother than identifying as a woman is a negation of my father's masculinity or manhood or something to that effect. But the point being, you don't have to disassociate. And this came up in the video I watched around the, what is the woman's name again? The quadroon. No, I can't remember. And I just watched it like an hour or two ago. What is it again? The woman who did the quadroon poem. Anyway, but she said, she's asked in the video, Melissa Osborne, thank you. No, Maya Osborne, isn't it? Maya? You're probably right. No, it is Maya, Confessions of a Quadroon. When and her mother's mixed, but brown skin and looks black, and apparently doesn't always or didn't always identify as black. But her white father expresses feeling like he's being left out of the equation by his daughter saying at the time of the interview, to now, at least right now, I identify as black. And the point still, which I think is first of all, I think it's deep, and it relates to the point that we've also talked about with Jared Sexton and about the history of the biracial category and having a lot of it emanate from white women, parents of black children in the 90s, not wanting to, I believe as Sexton was putting it at the time, fully immerse themselves and their children in the black world. They wanted the black husband, they wanted the black child, but they didn't want the black community. So they didn't want to feel disassociated from their child by having that child racially categorized as black. So they promoted, that is, white women promoted the category of biracial. Maybe another reason why I've always rejected it. I don't like that. I don't even like the word. The idea that you're mixed even is supposed to be more derogatory, but it to me has always sounded better than because I would rather be considered a blend of than two, because you're not, bi suggests both, and you're not both. You can't be both. You can be comprised of both, but you can't be both, and you definitely cannot be white. But anyway, that's at least okay. So, but when her father said, I don't like being, I'm saying, well, but one, that's the point of the category, and two, I think that is playing out more broadly politically right now, which is why we're seeing an increase the invitation to whiteness for those who could be seen to be multiracial. We're seeing this increased inclusion in pop culture to biraciality, multiraciality, as this invitation out of blackness. It's not a reinscribing of a one drop rule to put them back into blackness. It is trying to bring them out, bring us out of blackness. Now that category is now that the sanctity and the purity of whiteness is becoming a detriment to white supremacy, oddly enough. So as to protect themselves, to create more of the buffer that was the thought when the so-called colored community was created in Southern Africa, they're now trying to create the colored community. Whereas that colored community in this country would have been encouraged to one drop themselves into blackness and become part of a problem. Now the invitation is to become part of a buffer that would protect whiteness from the coming African revolution. And with the inability for people to recognize that, even as some of us may feel a certain way about how we look, about our relationship to the Black community or lack thereof, or our affinity for whiteness, if that's the case, whatever it is, the inability to, or the refusal to try to develop an objective analysis and to understand what is being done here is causing more problems. Now, by the way, this is not exclusive to we who are so-called mixed. And by the way, this is not also to suggest that we have an exclusive hold over confusion around race. And it is also not to point out, as I was just reading in the Halliday book, that we are not the exclusive category to be sort of toyed with in this way for false representation and inclusion. It happens to every identified group, and all groups need to be more mindful of that, I would encourage. But all right, there was a yeah, I did oh, there was a fact check on Kamala Harris's background, but we can let's see. I did want to come back to this real quick, just to, I think we've covered it before, but when the Pew Research did its last look, when this came up around Kamala in 2020, they revisited some of what they said are their key findings about multiracial identity in the US. And a couple of things I thought were interesting here, that at least as of 2020, some 6.2 million US adults, or 2.4% of the country's adult population, report being two or more races, with 21% of that group being Black and white. So only 21% of a 2.4% of the population is comprised of Black and white, which I think is interesting. Less than even white and indigenous. That's interesting. All right, so it's not, again, it's not a tremendous amount of the population is at least part of my point here. I thought this was interesting and does definitely apply to me. Racial identity can change over the course of one's life. And for me, it's not so much my own self-concept, but the way the world reacts to me as my phenotype has changed. But I thought that this was interesting, that 69% always thought of themselves as two or more races, apparently. Whereas previously only 29% of themselves previously thought of themselves as one race. But percentage of adults with a multiracial background who said they are two or more races and previously thought of themselves as one race. So they now think of themselves as two or more race, but they previously thought of themselves as one race. That's 29%. And 69% of those who see themselves as two or more races have always seen themselves that way. The percentage of adults with a multiracial background who said they are only one race and previously thought of themselves as two or more races is 29%, and 70% of those who have said only one race have always thought of themselves as always one race. Most adults with a background that includes more than one race do not consider themselves multiracial. 47% of those with multiple races in their background cited their family upbringing and or physical appearance as in determining how they identify or did not identify as multiracial. That was always my experience. When I went outside, I was never considered to be anything other than black. It was maybe a variation of black, but that was really it. And it was rare with that signature experience of my mother coming to pick me up and this kid I went to school with not believing she was my mother. He was like, you cannot have a white mother. It's impossible. And now for me to say I have a black parent is like people are like, nah. And that he was dark. They're like, nah, prove it. So, but my point is that a lot of us will determine that based on how we end up looking. For multiracial adults, experiences with discrimination are often tied to racial perceptions. Now, this I actually thought was interesting because according to those Pew interviewed or surveyed, we of mixed race report slightly higher levels of discrimination than even black folks in terms of being subjected to racial slurs or jokes. And this actually resonates with me. Now, we're less likely to be unfairly stopped by police. And my personal experience with the police has been largely, relatively speaking, again, emphasis on relatively speaking, positive. But in terms of subjected to jokes or slurs, I feel like I do feel like I've gotten it as much as anyone, if not more. So I did think that was interesting. Not that I was interviewed for this, but so I think that was it. Oh, wait. There was one more. What did it? Oh, because Amber Rose had gotten backlash after that's why I looked at this. Amber Rose receives backlash following Mariah Carey race comment. This is in 2020. According to the blast, Rose received tons of backlash for mentioning Carey's race. She writes, she was saying that she was pictured with Mariah Carey when you're both light-skinned, bright-skinned, multiracial goddesses, but one is talented and the other one is a hoe, Amber Rose wrote. Love you, Mimi. And then she got backlash because she was saying, like, why are you trying to big up your lightness and your being mixed and whatnot? Actually, I don't know why did I make that? I don't have any other notes for that. I don't know what I was thinking for that. Maybe just about oh, that's why you're right, because I was saying that, yeah, on the one hand, you want to have a healthy self-concept, but it is helpful to understand how that would play and why it would play a certain way and to be respectful of that history. So I often feel the same way. I often have to dumb down how beautiful I think I am because I don't want to be misunderstood. I don't want to be misunderstood. Oh, man. Yeah, that's a good point. Hoes have talent too. Why she got to why disrespect the hoes? And thank you. I couldn't find the one that said colonizers. That's the one I wanted more than anything. The t-shirt hits when I wear it. Yeah, I'm pushing it. I'm pushing it. That's what I'm saying. I got to dumb it down. I got to dumb it down because when I you know, when I take the Cyclops shades off on my self-concept, people misunderstand it. People need me to be a little more self-deprecating. There's a line in that show Veep where the young up and coming and good looking shady dude is being asked. He's being told on behalf of the vice president not to speak. Because she says, because when you say it, it comes off as hostile or something like that. Because she was saying, you know, like we need somebody less attractive. All right. All right. So that's it. That was really all I got on that particular issue. And but I'm happy to come back to this if we have time, maybe later or another time to talk more about this issue. But ultimately, my point, I'll just conclude this by saying that we still have to continue to do more to recognize, because I think we say it, but I don't think we go far enough to we're not encouraged often enough to go far enough in unpacking the social construct and the function of race and identity. And even beyond the mixed race issue, there is again the personal experience, the personal self-concept, and all of that, and then there is what is the objective reality and the function it is meant to play, and that our identity and how we feel has to be sometimes juxtaposed against how we are identified out in the real world, and then ultimately that we shouldn't be, as I think is happening everywhere, scared of actual left politics, and which would help us be better at assessing when our identities are being toyed with and manipulated for a greater evil. And then lastly, regarding this work with Professor Halliday, that the goal should be to move beyond the symbolic power. That we should stop wanting our power to be relegated to symbolize some societal advance that has not actually occurred. And again, that plays across all identities, racial, gendered, or otherwise, religious, etc. All right. I did not talk about the Tyler stuff, and I don't even know what that is. So sorry about that. Okay, let me just do a couple things before Mike Africa gets here. And there's a couple, oh man, maybe that. So one of them is, no, I'm gonna save that one. Let's just well, a couple just real quick, because the Google alert keeps showing me, just real quick. Again, the Chicago Defender is doing the black press business class thing. There is no economic power in the African American community in the way that they attempt to describe it here. So it's just another reference again to the buying power of black people that is not properly respected. And of course, as it says here again, according to a report by Nielsen, and again, nobody wants to vet why are we referring to Nielsen for economic data? What is Nielsen doing? They're an ad ratings company. So the prevalence, how often it still boggles my mind at how often people will start with, according to a report by Nielsen, black consumers collectively have a buying power projected to reach 1.8 trillion by 2024. This economic influence extends beyond mere consumption. It shapes market trends, influences product development, and drives innovation. First of all, no, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. None of what that person's just said there is true. And here's a quick example of why I know that that's false. And I keep saying I should do more of this, but just to show you, but so I'll at least do it here. It is absurd to point to this black buying power as something special, never mind real. 2024 Nielsen Diverse Intelligence Series reaching Asian American audiences. So a little while ago this month, let me just skip ahead here. Asian Americans, 1.3 trillion in buying power. Now, what is this saying here? Now, this Yahoo Finance piece, this is not targeting Asian. This is not in an Asian American targeting press, telling Asian Americans to bootstrap themselves into to closing racial wealth. No, this is a more honest assessment. This is Nielsen and Yahoo Finance telling marketers, target your Asians. They got money to spend. Nobody's saying the Asian American wealth gap is going to be closed with their buying power, which again is the equivalent of black people. I pointed out in my work, black people's 1 point whatever trillion buying power is still only 1/8 of the buying power that is said to exist in the country. So the idea that black people can do something with it that is going to close gaps when every other group, whether it's Asians, they measure millennials, they measure Generation Z, they measure the LGBTQ community, they measure municipalities, they measure nations. So this idea that black buying power is somehow unique and can be used in some special way to address the very particular history and problems of black people is just monstrously absurd. But because the black press continues to benefit from the mythology in attracting ad revenue, they continue to misrepresent the economic condition to their black audiences. All right, so I'm gonna there. So that's okay. So that was that. So there are two clips. So Lord Jamar just went on. Lord Jamar, legendary brand Nubian MC. Can we bring on Dr. Malveaux, please? Absolutely not. Why? Why? For what? So she can call me more names and misrepresent my work on my own show? I'm good. I'm good. She's wrong. Demonstrably wrong. That's all there is to it. Exactly. I couldn't have said it better myself. You bugging. So that's it, from time to time I get accused of this. Not everybody that calls me out my name deserves my time and response, by the way. Not everybody that says some wild monstrosities about me deserves engagement. People who have principled disagreement, I welcome them all the time. By the way, Tandasizwe Chimaranga, we just did a great show yesterday commemorating Robert Allen, Bernice Johnson Reagan, and Sheila Jackson Lee, which is a stretch of a contradiction for me, but but Tandasizwe is a perfect example. The sister stays having principled criticism of me and my work. And we disagree on a couple of things, but she comes through all the time. We do a show together. My point is the disagreement is cool. It's just got to be principled and without all the vitriol and hostility. And it has to be specific to something I've said or done, not, other than that, if Professor Malveaux would either in interview or better yet, written scholarship, read my work and explain in detail without all the hostility, just break down what she thinks is wrong with my argument, I'd be happy to engage. In fact, I dare her to do it. I dare anyone to do it. There has still not yet been literally zero criticisms of my work that are based on the work itself and reference the work itself. Everyone else who says they have an issue with the work is misrepresenting it, admits to not having read it, or cannot prove that they've read it through their argument. Not one. No, she's not. And Zenzi, with all due respect, you've just identified yourself as being human too, because you're not always right either. She just tweeted that you are wrong on every point. Send me the tweet. And does she explain? Does she break down in tweets? Send me the link. Meanwhile, let's deal with let me
right. This whole hip hop thing that you got going on, I saw you online challenging KRS, challenging multiple rappers, Busta Rhymes included.
And these all people I love and respect.
Yeah, no,
just to
come
put it out there.
Yeah, put it out there. No, it's
even
it's
if they're
not,
mad at me right
it's
now,
not a malicious thing. I don't think you're coming off as a malicious thing. I think that you're coming off as, I really want to get to what the truth is.
Yes,
you know what I'm saying?
There you go.
So I feel like that you're challenging them to say, basically, and you clear this up. This is what I'm saying. Hip hop started with black people, black culture. From the beginning, the DNA of hip hop, like we spoke about, the DNA of hip hop is sampling. We sampled old jazz records, R&B records, things of that nature.
Disco,
we weren't sampling merengue
soul,
and Julio Iglesias.
That's incorrect. So that's incorrect. And I can't believe these legends of the game got this wrong. Yes, the foundation of sampling was often James Brown and Black American whatever, but you can't be serious. You can't be, and the reason I know this is not true is because I used to read all the liner notes of cassettes and CDs. And I used to read all of who sampled, where they got the sample. I learned about Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd. I learned about Billy Cobham, the Panamanian Afro-Panamanian Brooklyn jazz drummer. I learned about salsa. I learned about merengue. They did. I learned about there's De La Soul has a sample in that song. Watch Out. I think it's in Portuguese. My Spanish speaking family can't even identify where it sounds like some. So that's a bad way to argue that hip hop is specifically Black American. That point right there doesn't work.
Listen, they weren't sampling.
Or Yellow Man,
they
or none of that.
sampling Yellow Man for records.
Yes, they were. They
comes...
absolutely were sampling reggae and whoever. That's I can't believe
Black
that.
people, Black music,
Black American youth.
American youth, period. Break dancing, everything. Now, explain to me like how you broke it down. Explain to them like how you broke it down to me, because it made 100% sense.
Well, you just broke it down just now. All I said was what you just said. I didn't say that Puerto Rican people weren't on the scene while this was going on. I didn't say that people of Caribbean lineage weren't some of the first to DJ and all that. Kool Herc was of Jamaican lineage.
Yeah.
What we're saying is that everything that they were doing was a Black American thing. They had to play Black American music. They had to dress like Black Americans.
Ooh, okay,
they had to talk like Black Americans.
Okay.
They had to everything like Black Americans. And there was
they weren't doing Jamaican. They weren't culture to get to hip hop. They were using the Black experience to get to hip hop.
There is nothing Puerto Rican or Hispanic about hip hop. There are no infused words. You see how we say rap ciphers? That came out of 5% Nation, because the 5% Nation has been in hip hop since its inception.
Like that
so now
point.
we've entered the lexicon, the dialect of hip hop. Yet we don't hear words in the lexicon, in the DNA, such as, I don't know, give me any fucking Spanish word, you know. Bueno. We don't say no bueno. Like, that's not a thing that we say in hip hop. Like, you know what I mean? We don't say, you know, put your Rosclot hand in the air. We don't do none of that. We do, and what the rest of the world follows, and it's not just y'all, the whole world follows what Black America does.
So what I like about what he's saying there is that what Black America produces has been a guiding light to the world. What is missing in the analysis is that what Black America produces is in many ways a composite of diaspora experiences that infuse what happens here in Black America. And because the United States is the central empire, what happens to those colonized within is projected with greater magnitude into the world, often as part of their cultural imperialist efforts. So what I've often frustrated by these arguments is that they take a basis in reality and then go left, but not in a good way, not politically, in their analysis, and then get caught up in the FBA and the ADOS and all the other kind of nonsense. And then it turns into a hostility, when the way I was raised intellectually, culturally, et cetera, around hip hop and hip hop history is that it was, yeah, it's Black America that is the final producer and conveyor. But Black America is itself an extension of the African diaspora and a composite of the African world, in conjunction with the diaspora that was coalesced in New York City because of the particular history of the United States and its interaction with the African world, and why New York becomes the Mecca of Blackness. Instead of getting into all of that, it gets turned into, no, they weren't there. They had nothing to do with it. They came late. They're not involved. They're trying to take credit. It's our thing. It's this, that, and the third. We don't use Spanish words. But that also could get into the history of the Nuyorican experience. A lot of Nuyorican, they don't use Spanish words, period. Because they're here. What's false? Be specific. Put it in the, send an email with the links. What's false? And maybe you weren't talking to me, but you know. So now, why I don't like the whole thing about Black American supremacists and all of that is that, admittedly, my bias and my defensiveness around Black America is that a lot of what Black America has produced and contributes is suppressed. And what Black America is given credit for is what the United States wants Black America to be given credit for. But Black America's contributions, for instance, to the African world, to political struggle, to analysis, to obviously culture, et cetera, and so forth, is often underappreciated or only appreciated in the context of U.S. empire, which is part of the nuance that I wish they would have teased out. But all right. Listen, I'm happy to continue all of that. I'm happy to continue. We can come back to all of that. And he says something else in there that I want to get to, but we're running out of time, and I don't want to disrespect the time of our next guest. And I'm very excited to talk with him about this new book and project. So all of that said, with everything that I've been saying so far this morning, we'll continue to tap in and revisit all these things. Please do continue to comment. And particularly, if you really want to prove me wrong or whatever in disagreement, don't just put it in the YouTube comments. Send me an email and lay out your argument with links and support so that I can follow up on it, because I can't always keep up with all the YouTube comments, and most times people don't, identify themselves or lay out an argument clearly, whatever, without hostility. Send me an email and let's continue to build. That said, we will come back to this, and maybe we'll get Hiram back. Why has this become such a debate if none of our cultures own hip hop? This has been sold long. I agree. That's another part of it that's left out of it. The what's my email? I mix what I like at gmail.com. Look in the show description. You can find all my contact information there. And Hiram, you're exactly right. But Lord Jamar said Puerto Ricans came to the party late. So my man Hiram, I don't know. I don't know to what extent you got valid voice in this no more. Anyway, just playing. We'll come back to that. I look forward to building some more on that. So we're going to take a quick break and come back with our next guest. Please continue to like, share, subscribe. Put this in your socials. Support our Patreon. Back in a quick second.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
All right, everybody, welcome back to I Mix What I Like. Jared Ball here with you again. Very happy to be so. Our next guest is a podcaster, an activist, an artist, an author, and also a native son to Philadelphia and the MOVE movement. He has a new book called On a Move, Philadelphia's Notorious Bombing and a Native Son's Lifelong Battle for Justice. And of course, I'm talking about Mike Africa Jr. Mike Africa Jr., welcome to the program. Good to meet you, see you, and welcome.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be here. How you feeling today?
I am, as we say, as good as could be expected, and looking forward to our conversation. How are you?
I'm good. I did my push-ups.
Oh, wow. You better. Yeah, see.
Listen, health is the most important thing, man. Take care of yourself.
Oh, no question. Where I'm at, though, I miss push-ups. Where I'm at with my physical, I got to do other things. So I'm fresh off the stretches and the tension bands. Yeah.
That's good too, though. It's really just about activity. It don't really matter if you do push-ups or run or whatever, as long as you stay active. That's what it's about. Got
to stay active, and I'm gonna take get my 60 minutes of walking in later. So there we are. Get the steps in. So as I've been telling a lot of people lately with a lot of the work that's been coming out, I have not had a chance to read the entire book. I've read a little bit of the beginning, and I always skip and read the epilogue or how people conclude. I'm interested how they conclude, but there's a lot. I did want to ask, first of all, for you to lay out what you're doing in this book. But I did also want to ask, because I had, it's been a little bit a while now, but I had for a time followed your podcast where and I'm wondering to what extent are the stories you were telling in your podcast elaborated upon here, or is this new, etc. But beyond that, please just break down what you've done in this book, and congratulations. And it's and you've written it with D. Watkins, who I've also crossed paths with here in these Maryland streets. So just another, but yeah, please go ahead.
So this book is about, it's more like an in-depth look into the MOVE organization, how it was started by the founder, my great uncle John Africa, and it kind of goes into why he decided to start the organization. The organization is like 50 years old, but nobody has ever written a book about it. Nobody from MOVE wrote a book about it. And so my job for this book was to talk about the bombing, but talk about the lead up to it and why the government felt the need to drop a bomb on MOVE, and why MOVE took the position to just stand steadfast and like knowing that I'm sure they didn't know that a bomb was going to be dropped on them, but they definitely knew from the attacks previously by Frank Rizzo's officers in Philly that, you know, the police department was very vicious at the time. And, you know, they stood strong and said, we going, whatever you come with, we're going to match you. And that led to a bombing. So my job was to talk about it and to give people answer some of those questions that people had no answers to for the past 50 years.
You do recount some very troubling experiences, and you make the point that I would like you to tell us, to take us back to your experience with the bombing, but you do point out that this was not the first. The 85 bombing was not the first violent attack on MOVE, and then you also talk about, at the end of the book, you at least mentioned the sort of, I don't know, serendipity or random fortune of you not being in the house that day in 1985.
Yeah.
So could you talk a little bit about what was happening in the house? Who was there? Why was it seen as such a target and a threat?
Well, the real deal is that, you know how it is, man. The government don't want Black people advancing. They don't want, the whole COINTELPRO program that was set up by the government, man. They, any Black messiah, neutralize them, discredit them, find any misdeeds and exploit it. Use the media to your advantage to take these organizations down. that didn't stop just because the MOVE organization was a new group, newer than the Black Panther Party or some other groups that were fighting for liberation. So, Frank Rizzo, who was a very racist mayor in Philadelphia, my mother, my father, and other MOVE members were, doing their protesting against injustice, protesting against the Philadelphia Zoo and the circus and different places that enslaved animals. MOVE would say things like, the same system that brought Africans to America in chains is the same system that brought lions to this country in crates. And, the same slavery is happening and exploitation. So, but MOVE got under Rizzo's skin. Rizzo didn't want MOVE people saying anything against the system, against him. And they attacked MOVE. They attacked our house. My mother was 8 months pregnant with me, and they put her in jail. And I was born in a jail cell 5 weeks later. The attack was so vicious. It was hundreds of rounds of ammunition, firefighters using deluge hoses that blasting against the house, tearing the house down with water cannons, and MOVE was like, look, if you come at us like that, we're going to defend ourselves. So they prepared for battle. And eventually it led to the government dropping a bomb on them and killing 11 people, including 5 kids. My connection to MOVE had just been, I was one of the children that was born in the organization, and then, raised in the organization for some years. Fortunately for me, my grandmother and my aunts, they saw the escalating tension and they kept me away from the house that was actually bombed. So that's why I wasn't in the bombing. But if when my mother told my aunt to take me to Osage Avenue, if my aunt listened to her, I would have been one of the kids in the fire.
First of all, I didn't confirm this, so I apologize. How are you for time? What is your time like this morning?
I got time.
Oh, okay, just checking. Yeah, that's so. Well, let me back up now. So you said a minute ago. Well, we'll come back to the story, but you said a minute ago that your book attempts to answer a lot of questions people have been asking. Can you give us an example of what are the questions that you address that you feel like people have been waiting for a long time?
I think people don't really understand what makes MOVE tick. What makes MOVE, how MOVE, the inner workings of the MOVE organization. Like, as kids, what was it like? A lot of people saw dreadlocks. Listen, dreadlocks are popular now in 2024, but in the 1980s, I can assure you, they were not popular. And, we were dreadlocked, and a lot of times we were naked out in front of our house in public. A lot of time, our raw food diet. MOVE children ate all raw food. We didn't eat any cooked food. And, there was these are like a lot newer. You hear the Tabitha Browns, you hear these different people talking about the power of raw food and all of this stuff. But it wasn't like that for us in 1980 something. It wasn't some cute little store with a nice, colorful sign on it that said, you're invited to experience this magic of this nature's candy or whatever. It was a sweet potato, raw. You bite it and you chew it like an apple. And there was no processing with juicers and machines. It was just raw food, the way nature gave it. And, people saw that as abuse. The children don't eat raw food. Oh, we didn't go to school. Mm-hmm. We didn't go to school. We were taught what the organization's adults felt that we needed to be taught, which was John Africa's teaching, which was exercise, health, and fitness. Some of these things landed well for the public, but some didn't. If you don't send your kids to school, that's a crime. But see, MOVE would say things like, at one time it was a crime for Black people to learn how to read. Mm. Now it's a crime for, so the way they saw it was, they must be trying to use that educational system to, instead of educating you, indoctrinating you. And they didn't want us believing that Christopher Columbus discovered America. And they didn't want us believing that George Washington was a good person. So they taught us MOVE history. And no, we didn't go to school. So these answer these questions of why these things happen are just, a lot of them are answered. Also, something that's answered is a lot of the internal struggles that MOVE had with each other. Everybody didn't agree with each other. MOVE is not monolithic. You know, everybody don't believe that we should take this political stance. Not everybody agrees that we should have a confrontation with Frank Rizzo and the police. But things, you know, some people were outnumbered, some people were overruled, some people left the organization. There was always a lot of internal struggles and fighting each other. So, you know, and all the way up to trying to get people out of prison that had spent 40 years in prison, all the way to the point of 2018 when I was trying to get my mother out of prison after she spent 40 years in prison. The internal struggle where people disagreeing with each other almost cost us her freedom. And so, you know, I had to push ahead. I had to fight ahead. I had to ignore some of those people. I had to challenge some of those elder leaders in the organization. And all of that's laid out in this book, you know, and the purpose of laying it out is because there's a lot of people coming after us, you know, and people need to understand, they need to be able to see the signs. This revolution is hungry for fuel, for support. And, you know, I didn't want to talk about some of those things, but I think it's important for people to understand what organizations go through, especially when they're in a position where money is involved and, you know, people have the opportunity to get money versus relinquish that money and see people free. It's a whole lot of inconsistencies in the way people talk versus what they're saying they want. It's a lot. So this book really goes deep into who those people were, what they did, and why they did it.
Right on. So I definitely want to come back to the story of your parents specifically, but if we could just start back up a little bit for myself and anyone else who may need some of the background and history. Again, I haven't gotten to too much of it, but just in looking over the table of contents, you talk a lot about, or seem to talk a lot about John Africa's relationship to the FBI. And so could you talk about who John Africa was and as the founder of MOVE, and give us some of that background or a summary of what what readers will learn more about when they read the book?
Yeah, so John Africa was the founder of MOVE, and he started the organization, he said, because life was in trouble and it needed help. And by talking about life, meaning people, animals, and the environment. And, you know, he saw the way life was being treated, just people going to jail, getting arrested for crimes that Richmond politicians commit the same crime or far worse, and they never face the same punishments that poor people face. They never face the same punishment that black people face. So he wanted to do something about it. He was tired of it. He was angry about it, and you know, he was very charismatic. He had a lot of deep wisdom and understanding about the system. He would say things like the prisons are nothing but modern day slave plantations. And he would say the system is controlled by pressure. And as a way to put the pressure on the system, you have to target them. You have to target them specifically. You can't expect to get a change without targeting the people that are actually responsible for creating or supporting the problem. He would protest at judges' houses. He would go to their churches. He would go to kids' schools and protest against the daughters and the sons of the people who just passed this law saying that qualified immunity. He would go to the families of the people who would support these things, and he would protest and threaten, and sometimes they would get into physical altercations, and he was just relentless. And in the 70s, he created the organization by just having other people that agreed with him. And a lot of those people were his family members, like my grandmother Laverne and my great aunt Louise. And it got to the point where he started feeling like MOVE should do the same thing to the system that the system is trying to do to us. which is constant pressuring them to have it their way. And once he got on the radar of the FBI, that happened. The FBI started saying that he was making bombs and brandishing weapons, and they had some key witnesses from the organization to testify against him. He represented himself in federal court, a federal court system that has a 97% conviction rating. The federal prosecutors were Harvard and Cornell trained prosecutors who never lost a case. They were undefeated. And him with his third grade education, his dreadlocks, and his dirty clothes that he looked like he just finished walking his dogs in, went into court representing himself, and he beat the trial. And so, you know, that display of wisdom and power, it led to MOVE members feeling like John Africa was God. And it led to the system feeling like John Africa need to be destroyed.
So what is this? So what will we learn in the chapter about the FBI? Is this? I'm assuming this is about surveillance or attempts to infiltrate MOVE. Is that what this is?
Well, you'll learn some of the people, like I mentioned earlier about infighting. You know, any organization that's effective, any organization that's affecting change, or that has the potential or the power to affect change, will have people among them that are not on their side, pretending to be on their side, but actually not. And, you know, in the Black Panther Party, many original members talk about their fears and wondering how many Panthers were actually Panthers and how many were actual informants. At one time, I've heard some of them say that at one time there were more informants than there were Panthers. MOVE faced the same things. And so COINTELPRO was very active, and it ran through MOVE. And some of the people that were on our side turned out to be FBI informants. And this book lays out that information. It's also really, I hate to use the word entertaining, but it feels like a movie, right? You remember on Malcolm X when they had to go see Brother Johnson at the hospital, and he said, and Malcolm X commands the Muslims to march with him to the hospital, and he says, you know, and then the police officer says, that's too much power for one man to have. That is what it was like in real life with John Africa versus the federal government. You know, he represented himself. He had a co-defendant. His co-defendant said that the way John Africa behaved in court, he thought they were going to get more charges put on them, because John Africa would actually walk up to the prosecuting attorney, put his arm around him, like he would like yank him toward him and say, you know, you ain't gonna win this case. I'm going home and I'm taking my brother with me. And the way he did it, he was like manhandling this prosecutor, this little white man. And he said the way he said the way he did it, the impact of his grabs and slaps on his back, you know, like he felt like he might get charged with assault. And, you know, if it wasn't for the fact that there are court documents to back up what I'm saying in this book, people wouldn't even believe it was true.
So the only problem I have with what you said is because I have this undying hatred of Spike Lee's film, is that I would only want you to reference that what Spike was referencing was an actual reported event. So let's give credit to the original actual event of Malcolm and the cop fearing all that power that is supposed
too
to
much
Spike's
power
movie.
for one man to have.
Yeah. I don't want Spike's movie to get the credit for that. That actually was reported to have happened. That's
you got to rationalize things, right? So like you look at what they said, what they show,
right?
Then you got to say what probably really happened. And taking it away from Spike Lee's film, I would imagine that police officer actually said that's too much power for that nigga to have.
There you go. That's probably correct. But anyway, so yeah, no, that's yeah, I appreciate that. And
Wait,
and
hold on.
no, sure, yeah.
How come you don't like Spike though?
Oh no, well, specifically that film, I don't put it on to the man himself, but and I have the shortest, because I don't want to go too far, but the shortest version is that we get very little of Malcolm and his actual politics and what made him a threat in that film. It takes 90 minutes before we even see Malcolm as Malcolm X, and so much time was spent on the early development so they could get into the fantasy of the change, that we don't get time with his actual politics. And so I feel like people walk away from the film not being introduced to the actual militancy and the analysis. So I've even said that I think you get more actual Malcolm X in the brief Mario Van Peebles rendition in Will Smith's Ali film than you get in the entire Spike Lee film. But that's my very short answer for that. But so I'm not really saying I don't like Spike. I just, that film in particular is, I have a particular problem with.
That. I kind of had the same kind of feeling when I was reading the autobiography of Malcolm X. It's like there was a lot of time spent on talking about his reefer days and his, and I don't know, but
see that. So, but that's something I've only come to learn more about and appreciate only, to be honest, in the last year regarding George Jackson. And when I went back and Ashanti Alston, shout out to him, sent me the copy of the Who Killed George Jackson book. My point being that a lot of what we read and have grown up reading are important works that are written for very specific political purposes, not necessarily for the revolutionary political purposes we as readers might want. So whether it was George's Soledad brother, whether it's Asada's autobiography, whether it's Malcolm's autobiography, these are all written for very political purposes that were not necessarily in each case meant to recruit revolutionaries as much as they were to tell a story to get somebody maybe out or over into a new, so it's not that they're bad necessarily, but they're not always, I think, to the point you're getting at. Like, if we really want Malcolm's analysis, we have to go to the speeches, to the other historical research on his interactions and his work, etc. And I would say the same, certainly. Well, that's why we have Blood in My Eye as opposed to Soledad Brother, and then that's why we have to go to other histories for the. So that's why, like, I would never want to see, with all due respect to what you've done with this, but I would never want to see a Hollywood attempt to do a movie on MOVE. Like, I'm always opposed to that, because I always think we're not going to get what we think we're going to get. We're going to get something that testifies against it. But
yeah,
that's,
I think that there would definitely be an attempt to whitewash the trueness of the story, the history. Like when the government dropped the bomb, I don't think they would make a movie. I don't think there would be a movie made where the police commissioner would be saying, we're going to use this C4 and we're going to put shrapnel in it so that when it explodes, anything in the vicinity of it will be stabbed and sliced with nails and weapons. Like, I don't think they would do that. And, the secret meetings that they were having about how they wanted to eliminate everyone. We know that this will be hard. Philadelphia will take a hit, but eventually, it'll blow over. We'll use the news media as COINTELPRO instructs to slander and to maim their character to the point where people won't even support them, even though we killed them. No one comes out alive. And then even after the bombing and children are trying to escape and they're being shot and they're being melted by the 2,000-degree fire, and a 13-year-old boy is burned and he just saw his mother get shot and burned, and a police officer saves this 13-year-old boy. He runs and grabs him and takes him away from the fire and the shooting, and the police officer is then harassed. And ran off the police force and called nigger lover by the other police officers. On the actual police footage of the fire, you can hear police officers saying, that's the last time those MOVE members will call the police commissioner a motherfucker, and laughing, you know. And there are a lot of things that movies will show, but I know that buddy cop films and making the police officers look like the heroes are much more preferred in Hollywood than.
Oh, it's Bad Boys Summer right now. It's perfect time. It's Bad Boys Summer right now as you speak.
You know, and so it's like, you know, to show these things in their true depiction, you know, I would be surprised if Hollywood wants to put it out there the way it actually happened.
So what they would do, though, so this would be my concern, because they're getting ever more sophisticated with it. What they would do is that if they did do it, they would do it, but they would tell the story through the lens of that one cop you're talking about. They would do it so that to make it look like he represents the
police force. Right. There's some bad apples. We got some bad apples. Most of the police officers are good, but we got some bad apples. Well, I can tell you on May 13th, it was the complete opposite. One was good, and the rest were trying to shoot. Listen, they shot over 10,000 rounds of ammunition at MOVE. 10,000 rounds. You know how many rounds of bullets that is? In 90 minutes, they shot over 10,000 rounds. They ran out and had to send for more. On the police footage, you can see police cars driving up to the site, bringing more cases of ammunition. And the type of ammunition they used was incredible. They used M16s, M1s, M14s, AK-47s, shotguns. They used 50 caliber machine gun. They used armor-piercing anti-tank guns, grenades. They had every type of weapon of war that exists, including a bomb, bombs. You know, so
I didn't want to get us banned from the live, so I'll use this instead. But this is relatively the size of a package of 20 AR-15 rounds. Roughly the size of this cleaning kit here. So that's what I was trying to think. That's exactly my point. I was like, we need a graphic, like this is about 20. You figure 10,000. And the other thing was me and Dr. Burrows is in the chat, and our other homeboy, I think all three of us were there that day, 00 African. We went, for me, was my first trip to Osage Avenue after years of hearing and reading about the case and all of this. And what I was struck by was the compact, small size of the street and the row houses there.
That's why so many houses burnt down, because the house that was bombed, 6221 Osage Avenue, that house that's the house where the fire started. And the fire, according to the records, the police commissioner told the fire commissioner to let the fire burn. The fire commissioner agreed, told his firemen to stand down. The fire became enraged, and it burned to over 2,000 degrees, a temperature that is hot enough to melt steel. And it leapfrogged across the street and ignited other houses on the other side. That's why 61 homes burned down.
And I was even just thinking of it in this moment in terms of the 10,000 rounds. So what you just said about the fire is, of course, unimaginable. But 10, I'm just trying to think of the space that we're talking about, and unloading 10,000 rounds into what would have been, I mean, the row houses are small.
Before that house was so small, before the bomb was even dropped, they had shot and blown the front porch off. There was no,
God, man.
the whole wall in the front, the whole porch and everything was in the street before they even dropped the bomb. 10,000 rounds of ammunition. And these were not service revolvers. You know, an AR-15 is a good sized bullet, a 50 caliber machine gun, M16s, M14s, M1s, shotguns. Man, they shot so much firepower. And listen, people get sidetracked with the other weaponry because when you hear bullets and bombs, it kind of takes away from the damage that a fire hose from a firefighter can do. It's kind of like 11 deaths occurred. Move people lost 11 members of our family that day. 5 of them were children. So because lives were lost, rarely do the residents that lived in that area get any respect. But people lost their homes. And, you know, if you, in comparison to a home, I mean, in comparison to a death, a home is nothing, right? 11 people died. 5 of them were children. So who cares about a house? That's kind of how it generally goes. The homeowners, the neighbors, the 250 people that were homeless, they don't get the respect that they deserve. So that's kind of how it is when you compare it with bullets versus fire hoses. But those fire hoses are so powerful, they can shoot 10 stories high straight up into the air. And firefighters are trained to never use them on buildings that they know people are inside of. But they still use those fire hoses on that building. They had 3 of them trained on Move's house. And those things could kill you. They could certainly kill a child. You know, they came with all kind of weaponry. We've seen the 60s Birmingham riot. They call it a riot, a police riot is what I call it. In the 60s when the attack dogs and the fire department was deployed to shoot those are water cannons. They call them cannons for a reason. And they, you know, those things are deadly. If Move shot any weapons, any firearms at the police or the firefighters after being assaulted with those weapons, I would say that they were well in their right. How you going to come to my house because of some kind of thing that you say somebody else did, and you just going to start shooting fire hoses at my house with my kids inside? I don't have the right to self-defense. You know, that's what I mean when I say this system is so messed up. They can come to your house and imagine if 50 Move members went to their house and shot 10,000 rounds of ammunition at them and their family. You know, none of them went to prison. None of them are, you know, the only person that went to prison for that whole May 13th bombing was one of the survivors of Move. Her name was Ramona Africa. You know,
shout out to Ramona. Yeah.
Such an injustice. So anyway, this book talks a lot about these things and the lead up and the racism, the extreme race. You know, we got 2,200 statues or monuments in Philadelphia. Philadelphia is more than half of the population is Black. There are over 2,200 statues or monuments in Philadelphia, and only 6, I believe 6 now represent Black people.
And you know the greatest injustice of all of that? Of all of those?
Fictional character. One of them is a fictional character who actually was a real fighter.
Who was a real?
No. Rocky Balboa is a fictional character. Sylvester Stallone actually was a real fighter. But
Chuck Webster, who was based on, was a real fighter too.
Chuck Wepner was a real fighter too. Yeah. Who Sylvester Stallone, according to Chuck Wepner, stole the character and created Rocky. And listen, the greatest heavyweight champion in the world of all time, Muhammad Ali, lost. His first loss was to Joe Frazier, who is from Philadelphia, who represents Philadelphia.
And how many statues does he have?
Until recently, within the last 5-7 years, there was no statue of Joe Frazier. Bernard Hopkins, the light heavyweight champion at the age of 50. Most fighters retire in their early 30s. This guy was the light heavyweight champion at the age of 50. He's from Philly. There is no statue of him. You know, and the reason why.
Well, Frazier does have one now.
He does have
I
one.
didn't know
Within
that.
the last-
Okay.
In the last
Okay.
5-7 years, he does have one. But you know what? You don't know where it is. You've never seen it before. It doesn't get 1 million visitors a year like the Rocky statue does. You know, and
Yeah, that's
not
crazy.
because part of that is promotion, but who's promoting it and why? You know? So this book really talks about a lot of that racism. Rizzo was the mayor when Rocky came to Philadelphia. Rizzo wanted to bring Rocky to Philly. They're both Italians, you know, the whole connection, and they wanted to do this thing. So they did the movie in Philly. And they wanted to support whiteness and Italianness and all of that. So that's what they did. And now people are more familiar with Philadelphia for a fictional character than they are for two great champions that were world champions. These are not unknown fighters.
No, and to what is probably the greatest honor Hopkins has is that the legendary mayor of DC hip hop, Head Rock, a proud DC native, did a whole track in tribute to Bernard Hopkins from Philadelphia. That's legendary. You got rappers from other cities praising B Hoppin'. So yeah, that's well, relative to what you were talking about, obviously that's lightweight travesty, relative to what you're talking about.
It just speaks to the type of prejudice. You know, I mean, if listen, when during the uprisings in 2020, armed guards, they were armed with automatic rifles, were standing in front of the Christopher Columbus statue so that no one would tie a rope around his neck and drag him down the street by horseback like they were doing all over the country. Those same armed guards would not protect children that were trying to escape a burning building. You know, so it's just a lot of problems, a lot of racism, a lot of hate. And so, you know, this book is kind of a warning to revolutionaries to follow. We mentioned that earlier. Like, this book was written for the revolutionaries to come. This book was written for the people that want to understand the movement, the way we move, the way we were raised. I didn't eat my first plate of spaghetti and meatballs until I was 7 years old. You know what I mean? Like, we ate all raw food until my grandmother took me out of the organization and raised me more regular. You know, but this book talks about all of this.
So I did want to ask you about to talk a little bit about your parents and then your grandmother, who you said, as you say, took you out of the organizations. Could you I guess summarize a little bit of what we can read about in your book, but who are your parents? What happened? What was and maybe outline some of the quote unquote controversy that I think you even alluded to already today. And forgive me, I am listening, but I do have to step away from the camera. But I just don't want to, you know. But as you're answering, I am listening. But could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the organization had disagreements about the people in the house in prison. My mother and my father were two of the Move 9. Move 9 were 9 people that were arrested on August 8th, 1978, that were serving 100 years in prison for a crime that they did not commit. And my parents were working to the whole organization was supposed to be working to get the people out of prison. But once they started fighting with each other about ideology, basically, it created a division. And that led to physical assaults on some of the people. In one case, one of the Move members assaulted his own mother. And it created a split. And my grandmother, and my aunts and uncles were on one side, and my mother and some of the other Move members were on the other side. and it was a lot of back and forth in just people just going at each other's throats. And that led to a separation where some people just decided that they didn't want to be a part of the organization anymore. And my grandmother was one of those people. And she left the organization. And since I was living with her because my parents were in prison, when she left, she took me with her. My mother, still a MOVE member, wanted me to be raised in MOVE. But because my grandmother saw the tension and the confrontation gearing up with the city again, she decided that she was not going to send me back to MOVE, even though my mother told me she wanted me to go back. So, yeah, that's how that happened. And a lot of other people left too. The organization went from having maybe 50 committed members and supporters to having maybe 25.
So that unfortunately sounds eerily familiar with other organizations we've read about in terms of when people get locked up and the struggles that ensue, often inspired by the state. But
yeah.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. What were you saying?
No, I said certainly stoked by the state.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I have to. So first of all, we're going to have you come back after I get a chance to actually read more of the book. And I know my man, Dr. Burrows, is in the chat and he's anxious to read it. And maybe he will join us for that conversation. Todd does a lot of work around the history of Mumia, who is often obviously related to the movement. Right. He doesn't. I did do a word search for Mumia in the PDF. So you mentioned him, but I think appropriately he's not a prominent figure in this story, and some might expect that to be the case. So maybe talk a little bit, if you would, about Mumia, his relationship to MOVE, and yes, Todd is saying he will join us for that future conversation. So look forward to that. But yeah, where is Mumia in relationship to MOVE?
Mumia was a journalist. Mumia is a journalist, and he wasn't one of the central figures. Neither was Ramona, one of the central figures of the organization's early beginning. Mumia, like Ramona, became kind of impressed by the way John Africa represented himself, impressed by the behavior of MOVE people, the confidence they had, the information about the system and injustice, and also their physical regimen. The way, some of them were doing 5,000 push-ups a day just for fitness. Like, it was kind of next level strength. And so people were just impressed by their behavior and the way they carried themselves. And they had a reputation for, just being strong, being united. So, and Mumia was a journalist that would talk about what was happening with MOVE, and he wouldn't listen to the COINTELPRO handbook. You got to remember, Mumia is a Panther. It was a Panther too, a Black Panther. And so because he was a Panther, they had COINTELPRO had surveillance on him since he was a 14-year-old kid. So he understood what that was. So as a journalist, he would tell the truth about what happened. He wouldn't listen to what the COINTELPRO would say about use the media to your advantage and all of that. He would tell the truth. And because of it, he became a target as well. And because he supported MOVE, when he was arrested for killing a police officer, a crime that everybody that knows anything about the case know that he didn't commit, MOVE supported him and still do till this day. So, but no, he wasn't a prominent figure in the organization's beginnings, but he's always been supportive and writing the truth about what's happening with MOVE, and that just telling the truth is a threat. So that's where Mumia fits in the book. That's where he fits in the history of MOVE as well. This book is really about A lot of this book is about my work to free my parents as well. You know, people ask me like, Mike, why did you feel the need to write this book? I mean, I wish I didn't have to write it. But the 50-year history of MOVE, no one has written a book about MOVE from our side. Ramona never wrote a book about MOVE. There's 9 MOVE members that were in prison for 40 years at least. None of them wrote a book. You know, and I just kind of think of it like, you know, it had to be done. It had to be done. We talk about the other people that write books about history and the way they told it, the way that it wasn't accurately portrayed and all of this stuff. You know, some journalists couldn't get close enough to the real story, so they write it a little weird. It's not 100% accurate. You know, so now here we are. We have the inside connection. These people are still alive. The people that started the organization or the people that were brother and sister to the people who started the organization, we are right now as close as we're ever going to get to that information. And for it to never be written by a person who lived it, it just doesn't make any sense. So that's why I wrote it. You know, I wish I didn't have to. Like I said, I wish my mother could have wrote it. I wish my father could have wrote it. My mother is John Africa's niece. When she was a child, a little girl, he would take her to his house and, you know, take her for bike rides and trips to the park, and he helped raise her. Nobody knows more about John Africa than she does, you know, other than his sisters who grew up in the house with him. They didn't write a book about John Africa. They didn't write a book about the story. And so I started this process because it needs to be done. And I know that you're not going to get a more accurate telling of it than from one of us doing it.
Right on. If you have a few more minutes, we have a couple questions we can get to before we start headed to a close. For instance, a couple of questions about, could you say a little bit more about MOVE's views on animal rights? I'm sorry?
I'm listening.
Or maybe talk about to what extent people can read about that in the book.
Yeah, you can read more about that in the book. MOVE's first demonstrations, and John Africa would have MOVE members go to the circus and write on the placards. It would say, Barnum and Bailey's Ringling Brothers sadism. John Africa was raw with it, bro. He would say things like, if these circus owners think it's so cute to watch a lion jump through a ring of fire, why don't they make their wife do it? If they think it's okay to make a baby tiger jump through a ring of fire, why don't they make their kids do it? If it's okay for those animals who are also children of God to do that, why don't they do it themselves? But they wouldn't, because they know that it's dangerous. You know, so if it's dangerous for their baby, why isn't it dangerous for the tiger's baby? He was very, very clear about how he felt, you know, and he would say that Black people, especially, who are always complaining about slavery, need to recognize the slavery of animals in a zoo, need to recognize the slavery of an animal in a circus. You think lions and tigers and bears and elephants are made to balance on balls, and if they're not doing it right, be prodded with electrical rods and stuck with steel spikes? You think that makes sense? If you didn't like it when it was done to us, why would you think it would be okay for it to be done to animals? And if you can't see the injustice in it being done to animals, then you should never open your mouth and complain about it being done to your brother. He was very clear about that. And that, it's all broken down in the book in more examples and more details about why he felt the way he felt. You can read about it.
Message.
So shout out to my man, shout out to my man, Dr. Haight and Dr. Burroughs, because on the Haight Awards, we gave an award. We named a whole award the Tillicum Award after that whale that they made that Blackfish documentary about that killed its trainer. And then it's if I remember correctly, they tracked its children and track like the genetic, the revolution was passed on genetically, like to his kids who did the same thing. And we were like, absolutely, like that is pure logic.
Man, look,
so you were absolutely, or John Africa was absolutely right. You're absolutely right about
if
that.
they can, if they can do that, so you have to rationalize it. If they can do that to the animals, to the people that they see as lesser than, then what stops them? You know, before Black people, Africans were brought to this country, before there was ever a war against the Native Americans, before there was ever any kind of need for Hannibal to get on those elephants and go, you know, before any of that, white people were doing that to each other.
Yeah, that's
the same
true.
thing that they were doing to us. And I know that there's slavery all over the world, all right, in Africa too, by Africans, you know, but to the degree that we're talking about, I mean, they're glorifying it too. Braveheart and Spartacus and all this, man, killing, they worship it. This is their thing, you know, and for them to like, okay, well, now we got a new victim. We like, hey, guess what, German? Hey, guess what, French? We ain't got to do this to each other. We could take a break for a while and save ourselves. We could just do this to these other people who are lesser than us. They're more like monkeys and they're lesser than. They don't speak the same language we speak. Let's do this to them. And so if we can be, you know, devalued, and then what's this? Where do you stop this thing? Where do you cut it off?
So, well, speaking of that, this is a question I'm glad Hiram is here to help out with this, because I had forgotten to bring this up. Can you talk a little bit more about the Penn Museum stealing the remains of the MOVE children? And does this come up in your book? Do you focus on this piece of the story?
It does.
That was just yeah. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
It does come up. You know, it's like, and this is exactly what I mean, man. Listen, the injustice, the hypocrisy, the inequality. In April of 2021, we learned from Maya Kasuto, who was a Penn student herself. Maya Kasuto called me and told me that she had information that explained that the city of Philadelphia, or the Penn Museum, Janet Monge was the professor, and Alan Mann stole some of the remains of the children that were bombed in 1985. Stole those remains and used them as research material. Made YouTube videos holding up their bones and showing them and displaying them to other people, and use them as fundraiser material. And then not only that, also passed them to Penn, or to from Penn to Princeton, drove them in their car to Princeton, New Jersey. And Princeton had a Coursera course where they taught classes with their bones to over 5,000 students. You know, and that is so, I can't even say how horrible that is. But you know what I think about it? The first thing that comes to mind is, imagine me, Mike Africa Jr., this young Black poor guy from Philly, deciding that I'm going to do that to some white educator child. I'm going to go take her 14-year-old child that died in their house fire. I'm going to steal the bones and then show them off to my friends. Do you know how much of a crime that is? That is an abuse of a corpse. That is a crime. That's a felony. You cannot take somebody's remains without consent of a family member. You can not take somebody's remains if you have consent in some cases and use them any kind of way. But they stole the remains. And then, you know, did just unthinkable things. What would happen to me if I did that to them? I would get more time in jail if I did that to one of their cats. If I knocked on her door and went inside her house without her inviting me in. It's incredibly hypocritical and unjust. And unfortunately, the mother of the child didn't press any charges and did not pursue any legal action. And that is the saddest part to me, because those motherfuckers need to be in handcuffs and they need to go to jail and experience what they need to experience, the unleashing of some mother who can't see her child, and let the fury of that person pour out on Janet Monge for what she did to that 14-year-old girl's remains. We're still trying to figure out. It's so unthinkable. It's one of those things where you just need time. Really, you really need to you need someone to handle it, someone that's far enough away from it to really handle it, because it's so hard and emotional to really deal with this kind of situation. But she wasn't even fired from the Penn Museum for doing these things. It's horrible. The bombing of MOVE continues to be a pain for so many people that experienced it, that remember it, that read about it. And the Penn Museum just made it 100 times worse.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Thank you for that. Just a couple, hard to even come back from that. But Todd's here saying MOVE was one of the many countercultural organizations, black and white, that existed in the 70s. There was a lot of public social experimentation during this period. I'm not sure why I forgive me why. Well, here we go. Black Liberation Media. Can Mike Africa Jr. tell us about the 13-run challenge and how people can contribute? I'm not familiar. What's this all about? The
13-run challenge is 13 runs, half marathons that I'm doing, each one in honor of the people that were bombed. The first one I did was on May 13th. I did for Ramona. The second one I did for Frank. And the next one is going to be for Rhonda. And it's leading up to the 40-year anniversary, which is May 13th, 2025. So this coming 2025 is going to be this 13 and half marathon. And I'm going to run from the cemetery where Birdie was buried to the cemetery where the other MOVE children that were bombed were buried. Mm-hmm. And if people want to get involved, if they want to run with me, I'm asking, we got two squads. We got a cheer squad and we got a run squad. Some people going to cheer for me. They're going to stand on the sideline and clap. And, as we cross these different mile checkpoints, and some people are going to run with me. And you don't have to run 13 miles. If you can run 5 miles, you want to run 1 mile, but we all crossing the finish line together. And it's just in honor and in memory of the people that were bombed leading up to the 40-year anniversary.
Well, on behalf of those of us who can't make any of that form of contribution to the struggle, we will be with you in spirit and in solidarity. Woo!
Some people are walking across, but we just, we're going to cross together. We'll cross together.
And when is this again?
So the last one is going to be on May 13th in Philly. Okay. We're going to run from, as we get closer to it, we still got a ways to go. Mm-hmm, the 40-year anniversary, right? So we want to do something impactful and important. But as also, from the heart, from my heart, to my family. The reason I chose to do this is because when we were kids, one of the things we always did together is we ran together. We playing tag, hide and seek. If people want to sign up to run,
where's
they
the
go to
sign
my
up?
website, www.mikeafricajr.com. There's a lot of runs in between, but the one that we're focusing on trying to get people to really, participate in is the one in May of 2025. And some people want to sponsor, I have a couple of sponsors. One person sponsored me for running shoes. She sends me 100. You could tell she's an older person because she sends me $100 and she's like, I'm sure this will be enough for running shoes. Running shoes are like in 1980 maybe.
Yeah, right.
But but I appreciate it and I am not complaining. I'm just saying. But
the link to Mike's website is in the show description, by the way.
Thank you. She sends $100 a month for running shoes. Others sent me running gear. Pastor Keith Collins at the Church of the Overcomer, he sent me running jackets, and so people can send different things to help me get across. 13 miles is a long run, and so but also the endurance, you got to be able to keep that up. You can't just get out there and run. Well, I can't just get out there and run 13 miles and I'm running 13 miles a month. No, you got to run, building up to that 13 every month and sustaining it throughout the whole 13 months. So people send me socks, hiking socks. They're called Darn Tough or Smart Wool because those are the best socks to run in. The shoes that I wear are Hoka size 11 or Diodora size 12 running shoes. Yeah, this is how you can support.
All right, there you go. What was the strategy of John Africa? I've always heard them say it, but never explained.
John Africa wanted to put an end to the system. He would say things like, MOVE ain't talking about changing governments, replacing one corrupt dictator enslaver for another. MOVE is talking about doing away with all forms of external government and replacing it with the government of self. So and I think how that played out can best be seen in the way MOVE lived. We didn't pay water bills. We didn't pay gas bills, electric bills, phone bills. We had our own income through our car wash. MOVE had a car wash. In 1970 something, MOVE was making $500 a day on a car wash.
Damn.
The car wash ran 365, 20, it opened up in the morning, 7 in the morning, and it closed. And when the sun went down, and I'm telling you, you could get your car washed on Christmas Day. And everybody that ever had their car washed by MOVE say MOVE car wash was the best car wash. And I'm telling you, $500 a day translates to $2,200 a day in today's time. That's with the inflation. MOVE had a watermelon. We sold watermelons and, made money doing that. MOVE did not believe in trying to get a politician to lead them into some type of freedom, and so that was what John Africa's strategy was all about. He wanted to get some land and have a farm where, we could grow our own food. He wanted to tap the ground for water so that we had our own water. He wanted to live, as natural as possible and free as possible without the intrusion of the political system. One of the reasons he never left the city, he said, because there's no way you can go where the system don't follow you. At one time, this country was filled with nature, but because of the system's imposition, it now is filled with buildings. So, he felt like there needed to be a presence in the city confronting the injustices from the political system, but at the same time, trying to live self-sufficient and independent from the government.
All right. Well, look, Mike Africa Jr., congratulations on the book. Appreciate you coming through. The link to your website's in the show description where you can get the book, information on the running. Todd is already confirmed, so we'll be inviting you back once he gets the book and we've had a chance to read it and we can talk more about it. But anything else that we didn't get to that you want to make sure to say, but otherwise, thank you very much.
Thank you. Listen, thank you for having me. Make sure you do your exercise, stay healthy, drink your water, do your push-ups or your band stretches, whatever you got to do, you do. Stay healthy. The most revolutionary thing you can do is be healthy. Don't let nobody take away your health, including yourself.
Right on. Well, thank you very much, Mike. I appreciate you. This has been fun. And as always, we say peace, like Fred Hampton used to say, because you're willing to fight for it. And we'll catch you next time, man. Thank you for coming through.
On the move. Peace.
All right, everybody. Big thanks to Mike Africa Jr. Please check the link in the show description and make sure you stick around for his return and all that is coming up on this show and on the platform. Make sure you have the bell rung. In fact, before I go, let me do this real quick. I'm gonna bring it up. We'll probably bring it up on Friday again. But let me just because somebody in the chat actually thanked me for not at one point during the discussion making reference to this. So let me bring back one more piece of this Lord Jamar interview. Just real quick.
I said, this is crazy. Why don't you play the pause game? I saw you say the pause game. I don't fuck with that. What's up with the pause game?
I feel like that was an industry plan.
Yo, the name of this episode is gonna be Industry Plan. Lord, how is the pause game an industry plan?
Because the pause game is it's created to make you think about gay shit. Where you wouldn't normally even think about this shit.
Niggas hell.
Yo, seriously.
I love this.
Seriously. I'm telling the truth.
Thank you.
Back in the days when hip hop first started early, you'd hear a beat, motherfucker be like, yo, that shit hard. Now, if you say that shit hard,
pause.
Why? Why? Why do we have to say that? Nobody was thinking about dicks and shit before when we said that shit is hard. Now all of a sudden, y'all niggas is thinking about dicks and nigga, whoa, nigga, hey, yo, that used to be the shit too. Like, hey, yo, like,
whoa. Why is this nigga so fucking crazy?
All right, so what drew me to that part of the conversation is a number of things. One, through my devolution into the Cam and May show, where they were bringing this up all the time and having fun with the word and cracking up. I thought, and I admit, I was laughing along with them. I brought a version of it here, and we've sort of been having a little bit of fun with it. There has been both some criticism of that and some fun with it along with us. I mentioned this earlier when I first started creating the clips and doing the pause and all of that I understood the contradiction in the origins. And this is what I mean by one of the crises we're dealing with, is that these issues are being brought up and discussed in very popular platforms and spaces by relatively popular people and blah, blah, blah. But they're often being brought up and then taken in a rightward political and that analytical trajectory. So I've always understood pause was a homophobic, anti-gay reference. And I acknowledged that my own childishness was what was enjoying the Cam and Mace childishness. I also brought up that my personal use of it, and this may not be considered appropriate or legit either, but it is the fact, is also meant not just in reference to something that could be homophobia or a reference to male genitalia, but I'm wanting to pause all public discussion of sex. And I don't mean to be dismissive or make light of the struggles of the LGBTQ community or homophobia or anything like that. But as I become older and more socially conservative, I want everybody to put more clothes on. I want everybody to stop talking about. But that said, so here's Lord Jamar saying, I don't want us to talk about it because it's always making us think about, as he said, gay shit. So this is my point. So instead of it being discussed as an issue of homophobia and maybe latent overcorrections by men involved, or not overcorrection, that's not really what I'm looking for, overcompensation. Instead of that being the discussion, and what it goes back to the traditional anti-gay, because it's making us think of gays, which I actually think is an interesting point if it was not made in that way. Like, I think it would be an interesting point to make, to say, because that's part of what I was laughing at. Here are Cam and Mace presenting themselves as ultra heterosexual, but as Lord Jamar points out, these nominally ultra heterosexuals can't not make reference to what is in their own mind of reference constantly to male genitalia. So so on the one hand, it does feel like an overcompensation, which I think is hilarious and part of what I'm laughing at. I'm certainly not participating or not meaning to be participating in anything that's anti-gay, but it's to say, because, you know, I'm part of I'm supportive of the queer agenda and gynocentric, apparently. But I do think it is funny in the sense that here are these nominally ultra heterosexuals who can't not think about it and can't not make reference to it. So that was part of what always attracted me to it. Then it just kind of took on a life of its own, and now I admit it's kind of a constant, and I think hilarious. But I didn't want to at least not acknowledge that this was brought up, and I don't want to dismiss the critiques that I and we have gotten for pause, and I also don't want to deny my own views of why I'm doing it, and that I do think it in that sense is funny, while not meaning to be hateful or hurtful. And I'm tempted. I know how it would sound, but I don't want to do the you know, I have the gay friend that co-signed it or whatever, you know, or you know, I don't want to, but you know, I did the, you know, the gay check-in and got permission from the unofficial spokesperson of the entire gay community. But anyway, so I just wanted to I don't know, I shared it with the EYL crew. We'll see if it comes back up on Friday, since that's where we've sort of yes, I do use the term differently, but the history is that, but it is clear. I mean, I've even been clear on it as a contradiction. Like, I get it. Like, I don't mean to be homophobic, but I get that that's its origins. I mean, that's always been the whole point. And there was a time where from its past, clearly, but where in dealing with certain people, where it was like, man, it is becoming a little bit irritating that I have to over police everything that I say, because everything now, but I don't know. Nubian King is quoting me Leviticus. If a man, so is that what it says in Leviticus? That because doesn't it? I don't remember that having sex with another man as a woman, both men have committed a test, but they should also be put to death. In the very next verse, or the one preceding it, they're also supposed to be put to death for eating shellfish and doing something else as well. So as I pointed out, here in the state of Maryland, with the veneration of the crab, encouraging the eating and consumption of shellfish, I kind of feel like the entire state of Maryland, based on Leviticus, is condemnable to death. By the way, also with me, it doesn't work, Nubian King, in terms of making a point quoting the Bible, because I don't take it as history, and I don't take it as being literal, accurate, real, worthy of following, or any of that. I also don't know that that's actually what was said, or who said it and when it was said, because you're writing it in English, which was a translation from probably Greek, which was a translation from probably, and from what I've been learning through these atheist debates channels, we really don't know what has been said or who changed it and when, because at various points, not only did it go through translations, but scribes either intentionally or not make mistakes. They change words. They even I just watched the whole debate on the whole thing about the Immaculate Conception, because the word in Hebrew that was used to describe Jesus's or the Savior's mother, what would be the Savior's mother, was for young woman, not the same word that they would have used for virgin. And then later translations saying, well, more or less the same thing. Young woman, most young women are virgins. So we don't even know what was said. Never mind. I just think, again, the amount of the lack of evidence to support the claims of this book is tremendous for what is supposed to have been the actual word of God. So that one isn't going to work. That part isn't going to move me. But per se, but and then yes, the Bible, I've watched many good debates on this topic over the last year. The Bible absolutely defends slavery. There's a lot of problems in these books. Someone threatened me using the Bible verses like punishing me with a free trip to a 24-hour crab leg buffet. That's hilarious. Y'all Marylanders are sinners eating crabs. I'm telling you, it's a mess. And I don't even eat crabs. It's not even about the taste. It's about too much work. It's too much work. They gotta get all dressed up and put on safety gear. We can't be that anachronistic, though. All right, I don't know, maybe. King James was black, though. Okay. Because I just happened to see that one. I don't know why I quoted that one. I just happened to see that one as I scrolled by. Anyway, listen, good people, appreciate you coming through this morning. Please do like, share, subscribe, support the platform however you think you can. Put this in your socials, do all of those good things. And if you can, support our Patreon in the show description. Definitely continue to subscribe. We have nicely crossed 40,000 and on our way. So please keep supporting that and appreciate you. And make sure you have the bell rung so you don't miss all of the things coming up. And thanks to Mike Africa Jr. for coming through. Again, thanks to all of you who will see this and hear this later. Thanks to you as well. Peace, only if you're willing to fight for it, like Fred Hampton used to say. And I will catch you next time here.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
What do you sacrifice? Come. whiteness, kinship, love. I've given up all chance at inner peace. I made my mind a sunless space. I share my dreams with ghosts. I wake up every day to an equation I wrote 15 years ago for which there's only one conclusion. I'm damned for what I do. My anger, my ego, my unwillingness to yield, my eagerness to fight, that set me on a path from which there's no escape. I yearn to be a savior against injustice without contemplating the cost, and by the time I look down, there's no longer any ground beneath my feet. What is my sacrifice? I'm condemned to use the tools of my enemy and defeat them. I burn my decency for someone else's future. I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see. Now, the ego that started this fight will never have a mirror or an audience or the light of gratitude. So what do I sacrifice? Everything.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.